Hey Tim, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. And Merv, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I just happened to look back on something and notice that this is our 21st combined podcast. Somehow we missed, or somehow I missed mentioning our 20th, which, if anything that ends in a zero is kind of a landmark. So I think had we recognized this last week on our 20th show, we should have given ourselves recognition and a little reward.
Yeah, that would have been totally appropriate, especially in line with this week's topic, which is recognition.
See what I
Um,
did there?
yes, I did. You are brilliant, Merv. You have a way of building into the topic and leading into it so richly as well as so naturally, and it's fun. It's fun. What I actually came up with a memory I had not remembered for a while when we decided that we were going to talk about recognition. Do you have a time back when you actually experienced the power of recognition
You mean, do you mean personally or just on the team or?
personally, just personally?
Yeah, both in I imagine there were times in project management because we did have a lot of successful projects. So there were a lot of accolades. In fact, as I was stalling with those words, it came to me, and I think we've discussed this before. And it was a situation where where we had completed a project for the state of Hawaii. And in doing so, we'd come in on time within budget, which was completely unheard of, apparently, unbeknownst to us, but apparently was not not often an accomplishment um, there. But in the recognition, because this was such a big deal, because it was a huge project for the state, the federal government sent its folks in as well to kind of recognize the entire project. But then myself and my counterpart from the state were pleasantly surprised and recognized with what was called a Miley lay. And I think I've talked about this before. Two of the women on the project had actually gone into the rainforest on the Big Island, had gathered or harvested some of the Miley leaves and had hand twisted them into a Miley lei. And if you think of the Hawaiian lei, which is the flower collar,
Right.
this is much different. This is kind of a rope lei that hangs down, all greenery, all leaves. But I didn't realize the significance. And apparently it came from the Hawaii tradition of royalty. And so by getting a Miley lei, it was considered by the team to be one of the highest honors. So that's one that comes to mind that still sticks with me 30 years later.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. How about yourself, Tim?
I'm going to step outside of project management and into business.
Yeah.
This one was totally took me by surprise. I worked for a transportation company in industrial engineering and information technology in my first real professional business. And the supervisor I had been there forever, right? And he was brilliant. He was calm. He was relaxed. He was common sense. He was the perfect mentor you could expect for. Now, in this corporation, they took a lot of effort in stating, we take care of our employees and we watch after them and do all that kind of thing. On his 25th anniversary, he got a box. Nobody showed up. No note with the box. It was just a plaque. And he was like, well, what do you know? They remembered. I guess they remembered. Huh.
Huh.
And that was his response. And so I took it upon myself. I took him down to the floor of the garage, and there were still about 75 people there. And I guess I took 5 minutes. I don't even remember what I said, but I shook his hand and I said, "You have been amazing influence It changed him.
Hmm.
It changed me too. It reminded me of how you take care of people. And the corporation isn't bad. It's not that they were bad. They had all intentions, but there was a mistake. And I realized that recognition of people was much more powerful than I'd ever thought of before. So I put it on to my shoulders whenever I was going to go into a group. If there was somebody on the sides of the group, I was going to bring them forward and not make them feel important, but help them understand that somebody was watching them, not in a negative way, but reminding them that they were important and part of the work and very influential to the work's success. That was my first step into ethics and how to treat people well.
Well, and if you think about it, and the story, the way you started it in terms of he got his black box and he said, I guess they remembered, you know, the old jokes about the gold watch and then you're out.
Yeah.
I mean, those are real. Those people laugh, but those aren't laughable items because so many people got their gold watch and then they were dismissed. And that's just, as you said, that is not that's kind of like a legalistic have to. I have to give you your gold watch. Now I'm on with business.
It's sort of like, it's a reward. And that's what a reward is. You've attained an achievement. Have a piece of chocolate.
Yeah.
He was not into receiving pieces of chocolate. He had cases and cases of these things. And that's not what he was looking for. He was looking for being relevant, being meaningful, people noticing every day that his participation had an influence. And that's what he missed.
So this is a perfect segue, I think, into the topic. I was going to go a little bit differently, perhaps, and think about, well, no, let me take that back. As we go into this, yes, I want to speak mostly about recognition, but I don't think I want to leave the rewards aspect of it behind because they are two different parts of how we work with our employees and help to create that environment of motivation and that sort of thing. But if I were to ask you for a definition of just the recognition portion of recognition and rewards, what would be a good, I was going to say clinical definition. Just what would be a good definition, period?
Okay. When you look it up, there's two pieces, right? Number one, you identify, okay? You've seen it before and you can say, oh, I saw that before and now I see it again. That's recognition. That's number one. Number two, acknowledging existence. I think the relevance of our discussion is a secondary part, acknowledging that somebody exists.
I agree. And I think that can happen also in two ways. I think it can happen publicly because you want to be able to recognize someone in front of their own management, perhaps in front of their peers, in front of those they lead. So you want to be able to show that recognition. But I think, and this is not done very well by many managers, I think there's also that recognition where you pull them into your office, close the door, and just have a heart-to-heart talk and praise them for specific accomplishments. And I don't mean, oh, you have perfect attendance. That's not an accomplishment. Right. But if you were the one who figured out the logic problem in how we do this particular equation for our customer's IT problem, and you figured it out in record time, and now we're actually ahead of schedule, that's specific. And that's something that an employee, whether that's publicly recognized or in private in your office, either way, that makes that employee feel like they're involved, like they're committed, and like they're engaged.
Yeah, there's something very personal about recognition. Rewards are great, and a lot of people live and die by rewards, and that's wonderful. But the recognition fulfills some very intensely deep personal need that we all have.
Yeah, we all have that human need to feel not important necessarily, but certainly to feel included and part of something.
Yeah, yeah. Now, here's where we're going with this. What is it about recognition that people need? What is its true value, do you think?
The true value of recognition. Okay, so I can take that from a couple perspectives. Let me take it personally. If I were the one being recognized, when I am being recognized publicly or privately, first of all, it helps my self-esteem. I may have been sitting there at my desk working away, wondering if I'm accomplishing anything, if my work is making a difference. So I think that's one. I think the whole idea of being told that I make a difference is exactly what I'm looking for as a human being. Another thing I think, and I don't want to go on too long because I want to hear what you're saying as well. But another thing I think that is very important is, for me, it creates that atmosphere or that environment of motivation. You are not motivating me, but you have just put processes in place where I can motivate myself from within.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's perfect. You did that actually covered everything I was thinking. First of all, my actions and words are important.
Yes.
And that has a way of building and supporting self-respect. We all need and desire self-respect. If I didn't do my part, work wouldn't have gone as well as it did. Again, that's a part of respect, but you get it from yourself, and you know it yourself, and you say, oh well, I'm going in tomorrow and work is just the same. But when somebody else, or when an organization or a group says, we couldn't have done this without you, this is important.
Yeah.
This is the value.
I think a few weeks back we talked about, and I'd raised the thought of, are we being mushrooms that is kept in the dark and therefore demotivated, just kind of fed whatever garbage needs to be fed to keep me working, or am I a truly valued member of the team?
Correct.
So it's am I a mushroom, or am I just a cog in the machine that is replaceable? I can be exchanged for another cog at some point. And nobody wants to be a cog. Nobody wants to be a mushroom. You want to be part of the team. I think that's where recognition is most valued.
Yes. There's something else we can talk about here too. Let's talk about the grand global experiment we've been going through the last year and a half, the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
What happens when we work from home? I read a lot of articles, and I read a lot of responses to questions to my students about this. And it seems that humans all go through the same process when we're in isolation. Even if we're remotely connected to our groups and our work, we seem to have this response to extended isolation. Number one, nobody sees me. Oh, I can get away with things, right? I don't have to wear slacks to a meeting. I can wear shorts and you just see the top of me, right? Number two, my coffee is in the kitchen. I can just sneak out and grab a quick cup of coffee and come back. And then that slowly transitions over weeks and months into, do I really need to get up at 7, or can I get up at 8:30 and just hobble into the office? And then after going through a couple months of that, we start questioning. This is where things get scary. If I can get away with that, is anybody really watching me? Is anyone really observing? Do I really matter? Can I not do anything? And if I do nothing, what's my value and what's my meaning? And so this extended isolation has caused a huge crisis in identity, in most humans across the planet. And I would submit that this has to do with lack of recognition, which leads to lack of relevance.
No, I totally agree with you. Now, the one thing that I would add to that is that fortunately, you and I belong to a career um, a career motivation whereby we are very much also guided by the schedule and timelines. So if I and if my colleagues and myself decided that we were going to do as you suggested with the human nature things of, suddenly slacking off or whatever, if I start to fall behind, I may not get the recognition I'm seeking, but I will get recognition. Now, that may be a little different than people who are in less timeline driven jobs where I can see exactly what you said, and people can lose motivation. So then, is it the person's problem or is it management's lack of attention that is the problem, or is it both?
I hate to say this, but the culture and the work environment is the responsibility of the manager and leader. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to put this on the shoulder of the manager. Recent articles and recent research can also say that the team can be incredibly influential here too. And so a lot of training content is transitioning to say it's the leader's primary job to bestow and to revitalize recognition and relevance. But at the same time, the leader and the manager also ensure that the team has a cohesive support mechanism in place for remote workers too. So the recognition happens not just between the manager and the leader, but also between the workers and the peers.
Yeah, and I've had a direct understanding of exactly what you mentioned, because in some of the material that I've been reading, because I've had my experience on my single project at a time, but the literature that recognizes or looks over many projects over many countries gives you an indication. And some of what I've been reading is that recognition, whether it comes down from the management or sideways from peers, ends up building that sense of community. And I was thinking, the example that I come to the quickest and closest is one of my more recent projects. Had a large team, over 200 people. And so therefore the project manager or the team leads weren't necessarily involved with or could see every single thing that an employee did well. And so what the management instituted was something called the Star Award. And you could nominate someone on your own team or on another team that helped you in some significant way. And then those stars were read out publicly in front of 200 people. And the person was then invited to the front of the room to collect their star. And so what ended up happening was, instead of management saying how valuable they were, their peers and other teams' peers were saying how valuable they were, writing it out in very specific terms, not generalities, very specifically. And every single week, people would show up to the meeting waiting to see if someone nominated them for the Star Award.
Oh, so that's great.
I think that built the sense of community. And I think that's exactly what you were referring to right there.
Yeah. I did something similar, except it was greatly informal. I would spend about an hour in the afternoon for the weekly meeting, and that was the next day, and print out maybe half a dozen of these certificates. And the certificates were the rewards. And the recognition would be in the middle of the cafeteria where strangers were watching us applaud and whistle and yell and be real crazy with this stuff. And it seemed that the audience of strangers, wondering what was going on and seeing and observing us, seemed to have a positive influence as well.
Yeah, that's great. because because if I were sitting in that cafeteria not knowing what's going along, I would pique my curiosity, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, and that was the beautiful thing. And it was like we had a secret and we were doing something really special. And that made the people special to be recognized as part of that secret special stuff. And you're right, the curiosity of strangers just heightens it a little bit. Yeah, it's a great technique that I've done on quite a few projects in the last 10 years. It works really well.
You just remember, it reminded me of something. It just came to me now. I was on a project, again, a large state government project. And one of the women from the customer team was very influential, both for her team, but also in supporting the IT services team. And she happened to have one of those birthdays that had a 0 after it. So I wish this were my idea, but it was not. Some of her staff got together and they put together this kind of blowout party. Now, in state government, you weren't allowed to buy things unless her own team could contribute. So they went out and prepared this party with all the party favors and cakes and all that sort of thing. But here's the trick. Somehow they found this person's brother who was an executive in a major corporation, got hold of him, told him what they were doing. He sent a limousine at his company's expense to pick up their parents, wow. And bring them, unbeknownst to her, and put them in the audience. Now, with all of the accolades that she received during that process, imagine her surprise when someone brought her parents forward who had been hearing all of this at the same time. That's recognition times 1,000.
Right. It's connecting all the dots. That's beautiful. You can't make statements greater than that.
By the way, I was laughing earlier when you were describing the poor person who may have been left alone at home in terms of coming to the office wearing a shirt, maybe in their shorts. I'm standing here talking to you in a shirt, but I've got my bathing suit on because as soon as we finish this, I'm heading for the pool. That's my reward.
That's great. So let me pose a question to you. This is a little off the cuff, but as we were talking earlier, I was thinking there's recognition for positive behavior and there's recognition for negative behavior. Do you think there's any value, or what is the value in recognizing negative behavior?
You mean recognizing as in disciplining, perhaps? Or
not necessarily disciplining, but I noticed that. And this is different from the way things have been before. And I know you've done other work in the past. Do you think there's any positive outcome from actually people being recognized for missing something or doing something less than what they could do?
In private, yes. Even as beautifully and as positively as you just put your example, I think publicly that would still give that person a negative feeling. And so I think it would dishearten them and demotivate them. But I really do believe that if someone, as you mentioned, I've seen this behavior in you before that was very positive. What happened this time, that sort of thing. That's a nice discussion behind closed doors where you can talk through the issue. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe it's something that you as the manager didn't do correctly to clear a hurdle out of that person's path. So it's worthwhile having that discussion. Right now, you're recognizing that it's less than appropriate results from whatever it was that they were behaving, but let's figure out why and let's correct it for the next time.
So what you're saying is really interesting. You're actually giving them recognition for a negative behavior, yet you are giving them a reason to be motivated for positive behavior. Yeah. Just through understanding their need for recognition. We've all seen these reports about, what happens when children are not noticed, and they're sort of swept under the rugs for various reasons, or they fall through the cracks, and whether they do good or bad things, nobody sees them.
Mhm.
And seeing somebody and saying, you are relevant, I need you at your peak performance, I need you here, we need you, I think has a really positive potential for motivation and improvement in performance.
Well, and I also think, and for those people who are listening to the recording of this particular podcast, some of the material I also read is that across these across industry studies, one of the findings was that 70% of employees said that motivation and morale would improve on the project or on the team or on the job, whatever it is. Motivation and morale would improve massively. That's the word they use, massively, with managers who just said thank you. 70%.
That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Wow.
Yeah. Think about that.
Yeah.
And then another thing, and this was from Harvard Business Review. I'm looking down at my notes here so I get this correct. The way that they looked at this from a recognition point of view, implementing a recognition and rewards process, but mostly the recognition, that it would take 2.25 satisfied employees to generate the same output as one inspired employee. So you can still have people who are, motivated to do their work, but if you really, really satisfy them through the recognition process, that it would take 2.5 people, just satisfied people, to implement the same amount of productivity that a single inspired employee could perform, could produce.
So what you're saying is, to actually get that inspirational work, it's not the team member, it's the management and the creation of that environment, especially through recognition and treating them as an individual.
Exactly. And I think, well, I know this from having seen it. Team members are happy for their team members who are recognized. Now, I used the example a little while ago about the Star Awards, where they were recognized in front. The other thing was, and I'm so pleased that we had people on the teams who are also deeply people-oriented people, because they would also kind of keep track mentally of who hadn't been recognized for a few weeks. And they would make sure, and again, this wasn't some sort of just ideological thing, but they would find something. They would catch them doing something right and catch them doing something well, and make sure that even those who weren't as popular perhaps, or as efficient perhaps as some of their teammates, they would make sure that something would come up and they would be recognized as well. So it's the entire team that becomes motivated and that becomes inspired because their team members are being recognized.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's, that speaks a lot about the positive potential for humans and groups. And again, this is human behavior. This is naturally how we function. It also puts a lot on the shoulders of the managers of workers, so that they can say thank you and it becomes a habit with them and they do recognize, but also managers of the managers, so that these worker managers feel they have time. And this is an important part of their job. It's my job, I believe, when I'm teaching project managers, is to try to provide enough justification for these young project managers to actually embrace this and ensure that this is a major part of their efforts in getting work done.
and perhaps some of us not so young project managers.
Yeah, and luckily, this part, the human part, we're never going to perfect it. So there's always an opportunity to get better at this. Now, here's the thing. Can I build a recognition plan into my project that I just do and I can do it as a checklist? Or should I just, recognize people sort of like ad hoc, just because when you recognize someone like from a checklist, it sometimes comes off as unnatural, right?
Yeah.
And I've done this before, and it's sort of contrived. How do you provide recognition in such a way that actually you know that it's going to get done and you're going to do it, but at the same time, it's not unnatural. It's not following a checklist.
Well, and I agree with you so much. Using a checklist to be spontaneous does not make sense, correct? I mean, this has to be from the heart. It has to be in the moment. So if someone does something really wonderful and just blows the doors off of something that moves the whole team forward, why would I wait till the party at the end of the month to recognize that?
Right.
Because I'm going through my list that says I need to recognize 7 employees this month. No, let's figure out a way to make those sorts of things happen. Because if we're sincere, if we're in the moment, if we catch the situation as it happens, then there's much more remembrance to that. There's much more memory built into that. And I think more satisfaction, and the whole team kind of gathers around that moment as well.
Yeah, there's more impact.
Yes.
The response that you're looking for, there's much more impact when you catch it as soon as you can around and after the event. And it's not just an event, it can be a behavior over time too. Recognition, that's the nice thing about recognition. Rewards are like, you crossed this line or you broke this ribbon and here, have a cookie, right? Recognition can be ongoing behavior that you're seeing over and over and over and over again. So it's easy to spot, and it's easy to actually raise and demonstrate performance.
Well, and I think I also would talk to our project managers who are listening to this, is keep your antenna up at all times. I can think of a situation where, for example, the whole idea of management by wandering around, MBWA. So I'm in a situation where I came up with someone and said, hey, you're ahead of schedule. That's great. And the person said, yeah, I am, because Bob came over and showed me a way to do this. Fantastic. Next day, walking around, met another person saying, hey, did you get with Bob to do something? Yeah, Bob was fantastic. Third day, fourth, whatever it is. And Bob's name keeps coming up, but he's doing it all in the background. Nobody recognizes it because it's one-off situations. But you as the manager who have got your antenna up and are listening to this, suddenly find that Bob's name has been given to you 7 times. Pull Bob forward and say, Bob, I need to recognize you. Look at all of these accolades people have been giving you because of the help you've been giving them. And it's amazing how that happens.
This changes project management. This turns what we think project management is when we start on its head. And you're knowing that your focus is on the human element of projects. This actually is a strong statement in your favor.
Well, and think about this, Tim. We've been going almost 35 minutes, over half an hour on this podcast. I'm just recollecting back over this last half hour. I don't think we've ever mentioned the tangible results. We haven't talked about productivity improvements in terms of gains, bottom line improvements, employee turnover, less employee turnover. We haven't talked about any of those things. What we've been dealing with up until now is the human elements. And I think that says something for where project management needs to be with the people factors.
Right. And it's easy. There are a small set of mechanisms that we all know need to be in place for people to do good work, right?
Yeah.
And We know what they are because we're people. And that's a beautiful thing. And if you don't know how to motivate or influence, you know, study yourself, learn yourself,
Yeah.
start exploring yourself. That's the beginning of emotional intelligence. You learn about who you are, what motivates you, what recognition does for you. And then you turn around and say, those people are just like me. What if I was able to give them what I need? Ha! And practice with that. That's where this actually starts occurring. Now, naturally, it seems that years 2, 3, and 4 are where we become highly refined in schedule and budget and resource management, right? This is an observation over like 17 or 18 years of teaching, and everybody says the same thing. You know, I learned everything I needed to know about schedules. And then the tables turn somewhere between year 3 and 5, and you start becoming aware of these humanistic mechanisms like motivation and influence and recognition and the power of recognition rewards and all these. And all of a sudden, project management takes on a totally different perspective.
Well, it does, and it becomes much more fun. You know, I mentioned before that we haven't yet talked about the practical or the financial aspects. The reason I think that we haven't is because they naturally then take care of themselves. If you have more productive employees, things get done quicker. If you have more satisfied, committed, engaged employees, things get done quicker and correctly. You know, if you have team collaboration, there's a joy to that work, but it also there's less turnover. And you know how expensive turnover is, employee turnover. In every aspect of employee turnover, it's much more expensive. So if you think about it from that perspective, if we're dealing with the people correctly and well, all of the other parts of this, the things we're in business for, take care of themselves.
So, recognition is engagement. It's keeping people involved, keeping people interested, giving them a reason to do work well. It results in increased performance. And there are a bunch of ways that the manager can do this. And you're right. Most of the mechanisms to increase this engagement is right in front of the manager on their desk, in their heads, and it's their job to actually work in this manner.
It's their job. It's traditional. It's expected. And when it happens, it works.
But you know what? I was looking at some Gallup reports too, and only in the last 5 to 7 years, only 15 to 17% of employees in the United States felt that they were truly positively engaged and they enjoyed coming to work and they enjoyed doing the work. And it was primarily connected to the way they were recognized and the way they felt that they were part of something bigger than themselves.
That's a scary number. I mean, that shows.
Well,
And
yeah, go ahead.
I'm hoping that's not true. I'm hoping those Gallup results weren't true for IT specifically, or were they generic, or are we
it was
bad
across the board. This is workers. Now, think about room for growth. If I were an executive, I would say, okay, who do we get into this corporation and give them $1 million to help ratchet up those people to 50 to 60% engaged? How am I going to do it? Who am I going to do this with? And what are the metrics? What are the measures? Let's make this happen. This is a huge opportunity for businesses to break away from the pack in competition.
Well, and think about this, how often, and this goes back to when you and I were on the floor managing projects, when people would say, okay, I have so much of my training budget, what do we do? What's the first thing people do? Oh, we need training in this technology. We need training in this process. We need training in, whoever thinks about training in communication, training in management soft skills, if I can call them, by the way, the soft skills in my mind are the hard skills, right. But training in those situations, nobody ever thinks of that part of the manager's responsibility. And so what you said, 15 to 17%, I can see that, because our project managers are great at the Gantt charts, but poor often at how they deal with their employees and their team members.
So this was a pivot point for Project Management Institute in 2015. Okay, in 2015, PMI, Project Management Institute, had been working with the Standish Group, who is a research group who were studying this and other things around work and project management, okay? And they did surveys of corporations and they did surveys of businesses. And PMI does a lot of this. They're constantly gathering information and analyzing it. And in 2015, two things happened. Number one, PMI released something called the Talent Triangle. And immediately after that, PMI started working on the development of the 6th edition of the Project Management Body of Knowledge, which is the standard that PMI owns and distributes as good practice. The Talent Triangle has a statement. It says, guys, we're really good with schedules and budgets. We're really good with resources and communications. But we have to double down on business and how business is impacted by projects. And we need to really double down on leadership. And finally, back in, when was it? 2021, January of 2021, they just changed the exam. And now, instead of breaking the parts of the exam into initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, all this technical stuff, they broke it into business. 40% of the exam is on leadership. 40% of the exam is on leadership. 10% is on business, and only half the exam is the way it used to be. That's how relevant and how important this leadership topic is.
It is important, and I think. Well, let me ask you this: now that we see that PMI has done this, and I think they're even doing more in edition 7 that's coming out in August. Think about this from your perspective and mine as project managers who used to be on the floor, in the trenches, sleeves rolled up, working with our teams, getting stuff done. How important it is for us as project managers to influence. How much influence do you think we have in terms of engaging employees, keeping them engaged in the project?
So my instant thought is that in our little bubble of the organization, which is called the project, we have ultimate influence, right? We have an opportunity to treat each project as a Petri dish. And yeah, we will set ourselves aside as the project manager who makes things happen, and people want to work with us, for us, and under us, right? I've seen this happen. I've had 2 or 3 mentors who were this type of a leader where everybody wants to work on their projects. And it's because of the leadership skills. Second of all, it just feels good. There's something that having somebody who really understands leadership and understands humans that allows me to feel safe, that allows me to do work instead of worry about my job, and allows me to not worry about the drama that's going around me. Now, I can't do that as a project manager in the organization, but I can do that in my little bubble, in my little Petri dish.
Well, and by definition too, the project manager, right? You are the manager. The buck stops here, kind of thing. You are in that decision-making role. So therefore, your team naturally is looking up to, if not you personally, certainly your position. So you must be in a position of having that influence. And I think from watching our team members and from seeing what's going on around us on a day-to-day hands-on approach, we as project managers truly are in the best position to help our team members not just satisfy the goals of the project, but to satisfy their career goals, their personal aspirational goals on the project itself. I think we are in that position to influence. People are looking for us to influence. So why not take this gift that's handed to us and make it work?
This is where I wanted to take the conversation. Thank you so much for that, Merv, because recognition is something that says you are important. I am willing to make changes in the way I manage and lead. I'm willing to make changes in the work to help you. Now, that's what recognition is. It's basically, I value you. I value you have something that I'm willing to sacrifice for. And that's what a leader does, sacrifice. Now, motivation does not happen from actions outside of people. Motivation happens from fulfillment of personal needs. People are selfish, right? I will work hard to get home to my family at the end of the day. I'll work hard if I want respect. I'll work hard if the purpose of that work has personal meaning to me. And that's where motivation happens. It happens at the individual. And so if you don't understand or value that emotional part where it's fun and it makes work better, it actually creates an intense amount of emotion through fulfillment of personal needs. Now, let's come back to recognition. Recognition says you are important. I'm setting aside time and showing you how important you are and what your positive and negative influences are on this great work. And I'm glad you're here. Okay. First of all, I'm giving them social needs fulfillment. You're part of a group. Number two, I'm giving you respect, self-respect. Okay, that means that you feel that the world and the people around you raise you in high regard. And number three, if I can connect you to a purpose, and if I understand your purpose, whether it's motivated by, I want to do something for the world, or I want to do something for my community, or I want to do something just for this company. If I, as a manager, can unlock that little puzzle and figure that out and connect that, this is intensely powerful for the individual, the team member, for the manager themselves, because there's incredible rewards for you. And then for the work itself, because people will do anything to personally fulfill their needs. This is all about human behavior.
Well, and if you think about it, then why, and I'm speaking now directly to those project managers listening to us, recognizing how important this is, why do we leave recognition to once a year at the annual review time? If you think about it, first of all, it becomes stressful because now I have to do annual reviews for all of the staff that report to me. So I'm going to do probably a partially good job of it because I'm doing all of them. The other part of that is I'm only remembering what's happened in the last several weeks. What about the good things that happened 11 months ago? I mean, there's just a whole lot of problems. So we as project managers have to get out of the corporate mentality of once a year annual reviews. And I know I've taken this a little off topic, but it's a truism. And we need to be able to do that recognition, as we've been talking about, spur of the moment, publicly as it happens.
So here's what I would submit to you. Okay. Yeah. There's a little book called The Leadership Pipeline. Okay. And it talks about the steps we go through maturity of management. When you're an entry-level manager, here's where you are. When you're a middle manager, here's where you are. When you're executive, here's where you are. And here's your behaviors and attitudes and your duties. And here's how you move to the next level. If people are interested in that, contact us on LinkedIn, and I can give you the details of the book. Now, we start off as entry-level managers because we're really good as workers. And we get rewarded for working with our workers, which means, you know, if they're not doing a good job, I'm going to say, move out of the way, let me teach you. Okay. That's not what a middle manager does. A middle manager gives those entry-level managers the sense and the time to learn how to become a middle manager, which means those entry-level managers are going to start off as technical experts, and they need to develop these skills, which means I have time. The entry-level managers have a bad habit of saying, I don't have time because the work has to get done. It's the workers who do the work. It's the manager who manages. So the changing in the whole mindset of project management, Merv, is stopping thinking about a manager of workers, but managing as an executive who has a staff.
Yeah, you just reminded me when I was young in my project management career. I remember my vice president coming to me and saying, man, you're working awfully late these days. Why don't you delegate some of that? You've got people going home at 5 o'clock and you're here till 8 and 9 o'clock. Why don't you delegate? You know what my answer was? I'd said, why would I do that? Because by the time I taught them, by the time I showed them how to do this, I could have done it twice. So I might as well just do it. Totally incorrect, incomplete way of managing a project.
Exactly. The thing is, if you've never embraced delegation, and many project managers don't, it's scary. Empowering somebody. Delegation is empowering. Empower means here's a part of my power I'm giving to you.
And by the way, what a way to recognize that person.
Yes.
To that person. Yes.
Yes. But the perception of delegation is it makes me weak and it makes them stronger. And am I a good manager if I make them stronger at the same time as making me weak? Now, what happens is, and this is what we don't talk about, we need to talk about, especially if we're project management mentors, is by delegation, it opens up an opportunity for you to practice executive management skills, practice more strategic thinking, practice this leadership stuff that we're talking about that can improve production and outcomes and work so much more than anything else that we can do on a project.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. So we have, I'm thinking 6-7 minutes left, Tim. How do we want to bring this topic home?
Well, I want to talk about one more thing.
Sure.
I want to talk about diversity and inclusion. This is one thing that is not discussed. Recognition actually is a little scary when we talk about diversity and inclusion because, number one, it's on top of mind of all of our executives and all of our corporations right now. How do we represent ourselves as embracing more, right? Diversity and inclusion inside of projects is incredibly pragmatic, and it's not a hard problem for us, because number one, when we measure the output of the team. Number two, it's the progress of the work that actually determines the project success. Now, diversity and inclusion bring with them incredible gold. Number one, diversity means we don't think the same way. Number two, inclusion. We take people who are broadly different and we create a culture of inclusiveness and support, regardless of what the other factors are, or capabilities, or any other details of the individuals. They have different ideas. They have different ways of thinking. We need that. We need that more than any other manager in the company.
We do. And I think we've probably many of the concepts and practical examples that we've given even during this podcast kind of fall right into this, because in my mind, real recognition is about appreciating the people first and for what they are, basically, and then recognizing them for what they do. That if you look at recognition from that perspective, appreciating people for what they are and then recognizing them for what they do, that does not have gender, it does not have orientation, it does not have color, it does not have ethnicity, anything like that tied to it. I think the other thing is that if you're looking at diversity and inclusion and respect that comes along with that, we recognize, and we've talked about this many times, that people are valuable, not just what they bring to the project, not just their accomplishment on the projects, but people themselves are valuable. Once we understand that people are valuable, we value their contributions, we value their differences, and we value ourselves as an all-inclusive team. So I guess everything we've talked about that kind of walks right into this sort of topic.
Right. And furthermore, human beings do this naturally.
Yes.
As an individual, I'm fragile against an unknown environment. As a group, we can be incredibly resilient. And not only that, we're going to be much more successful as a group than as we are as individuals. As individuals, we compete, right? If you get more than me, I get less than you. And there's only a finite bucket of win, right? And that's not a game we want to play. The game we want to play is, how can we include everybody? How can we create that massive we, so we can keep this game going as long as possible?
And maybe it's also because I've been in IT my entire career. Some of that also just lends itself naturally to diversity, inclusion, respect, and that sort of thing. Because if you think about it, and now I come from a consulting background. So you win a project, and first of all, you go to the bench. You go to other teams to see who can be pulled off of a project and then replaced from behind. So you pull people in who are talented and suited for that project, who fit that project. Sometimes that means, for example, I've been on projects where I was the only Caucasian. I've been on projects where it was all Caucasian, as an example. I've been on a project where there was 2 men and everyone else was women. I've been on projects where it was all men and 1 or 2 women. And it didn't matter, because we as a group, and when I say didn't matter the gender or the ethnicity or whatever. What mattered was that we came together cohesively as a team, looked at each other and says, how are we going to make this work? And so diversity and inclusion wasn't even a topic, because it fell into place almost naturally. We picked people for their talents and skills, not for anything else.
Right. Diversity all of a sudden becomes a conversation of, what's the craziest restaurant we can find that we can enjoy tonight? That's where the diversity actually benefits us.
Yes, exactly.
This is a beautiful topic, and I wish we had more time to talk about it. But that being said, Thank you for having this topic ready and talking about it. We're about at the end now. Where can we actually reach you if we want to talk more about this with you, Merv?
You can reach me on LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm all over the place, basically, in the social media. LinkedIn is probably the best professional area, but I also have a website called peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com. And I'm thinking, having now just gone, this last 5 minutes now inspired me. Perhaps I need to add to my 156 blogs with this topic, but that's where you can be found, peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com. How about
Excellent.
yourself?
Excellent. I'm over at LinkedIn. You can find me easily, and I'm usually very chatty. Right now, I'm buried, but if you do say hi and you want to connect, feel free and ask, and I'll I will connect with you. But yeah, I'm that it's all about the people, and it's all about embracing our community and support. And so please bring your questions, bring your comments, and if you have any other topics you want us to talk about, remind us, and we'll be happy to bring them up.
Fantastic. So until next time.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Merv. Thanks everybody who's watching this, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye now.